thank everybody for joining us this afternoon. Somewhat a last-minute invitation here, but we're recording this, and I am hopeful that we're going to have a lot of watch and hits on this by our students. My name is Scott Robinson. I'm a clinical professor and director of the REIT Center here at NYU Schack Institute of Real Estate. I'm joined today by Mike Landy, President and CEO of Monmouth Industrial, Ashutosh Dekhne, partner at McKinsey and Company, and Bobby Clay, VP of Business Development at Fabric. As you guys are well aware, both obviously panelists and attendees, there's been a lot of disruption in the economy the past year, combined with, I think, Mike, especially what we've been seeing, this kind of digital transformation in the retail space. And all of this kind of reminds me of a modified Hemingway quote: change seems to happen slowly, then all at once. And so, you know, in the past few months, we've been talking much more about logistics and e-commerce and distribution. And I feel like this has kind of brought to light some opportunities or pain points, however you want to think about it, within the logistics ecosystem. Some of those opportunities or pain points might exist within the warehouse, how you can use existing space more efficiently. I think, Mike, we were starting to talk about that as we slide into the holiday season this year. How we can think about transporting goods from the distribution centers to what we'll start referring to as the last mile, but that's obviously been evolving a lot, and how to improve the transportation aspect. And Bobby, what you guys are doing over at Fabric, really in many respects handling the adjustment and evolution of the end product being shipped to a store, to somebody's house. So there's a lot of challenges and opportunities with that. And so what I wanted to do today is bring you guys together as representatives of very important aspects of this entire ecosystem, speak a little bit about your platforms, what you guys are doing, how you're positioned for e-commerce, digital logistics and whatnot, and then maybe get into continue some of the conversation we've been having here for the past 30 minutes and open it up to questions obviously as well. So why don't I go ahead? We'll start with Mike. I know you've got a presentation here.
Yeah, Scott, as you get my slides up, your Ernest Hemingway quote of, things happen very slowly and then all at once, reminds me of William Gibson had a quote: the future's already here, it's just not evenly distributed. And, a lot of what panelists have to say involves envisioning what the future is going to look like. In the future, there's a lot of aspects that we saw early as far as the migration of consumer spending from traditional brick and mortar stores to e-commerce, shopping online. And at the turn of the century, the bandwidth of the internet got fast enough that bypassed getting in your car and going to the brick and mortar outlet and searching for things on Google and Amazon, etc. And our biggest tenant is FedEx, and FedEx was really growing by leaps and bounds as distribution went from B2B to omni-channel, business to business, direct to consumer. And now that's become the real growth engine of FedEx, and Amazon, and UPS. Today, because of the COVID lockdown, the amount of air traffic in the sky has fallen to early 1970s. Fewer planes in the sky than we've seen for decades. And yet FedEx and UPS have a lot of planes in the sky. I flew out here today, and the first two planes I saw was FedEx and UPS. They're delivering a lot of goods, a lot of trends. Consumer spending have been accelerated. So you could just move up a couple slides, Scott, unless I have control of it. I don't know. These are our buildings. You know, Monmouth is one of the smaller industrial REITs, but we're one of the oldest companies. We were publicly formed in 1968. Known as the FedEx REIT, we own about 9% of the FedEx ground network. I was talking to Ashutosh before the call. He's in Dallas. So this is the Mesquite building. The top left is the Mesquite, Texas, and then we have another FedEx ground at the Alliance Airport. And FedEx has just been growing as a result of trend. It's just the migration of consumer spending to e-commerce. But they have projected that U.S. domestic package volume would go from 50 million packages a day, which is what we saw in 2018, to 100 million packages a day by 2026. Now, after COVID, they're saying that's going to happen by 2023, about 3 years. So that trend has been accelerated. Amazon is the largest developer of industrial space, the largest consumer of industrial space. They just cannot grow fast enough to compete with the demand. And so, in addition, we have other tenants as well. But we pride ourselves on just doing single tenant, net lease industrial buildings on long-term leases to investment-grade tenants. And UPS, of course, is now a tenant of ours as well. Scott, if you go to the next slide, and there's an International Paper building here as well. International Paper, seeing a lot of demand because all these goods consumed online have to be packaged. So in that building, they have custom computer design, CAD automation that designs the packages to anything from the small battery to refrigerator, however things need to get packaged. They can design the corrugated cardboard there. People are using much less paper these days because everything is online, so the paper business is strong. The corrugated cardboard business is growing with e-commerce. Yeah, we can talk about all these buildings, but I think we'll go to the next slide. So, Monmouth invests conceptually, and one concept was that brick and mortar retail real estate would merge with industrial real estate, that industrial was no longer just a box. Some of the real gurus in real estate investment, like Sam Zell, derogatorily calls industrial real estate not really real estate because it's a box that you could throw up in 6 to 9 months. The technology's changed all that. That box now takes a lot longer to build, and the infrastructure inside these buildings is such smart, robotic, highly automated sortation equipment. It's just in a FedEx building today, and they shoot pictures of package, all 6 sides of the package. They can tell you where the package is every 2 seconds. So it's very high tech. So my point is that it takes longer to build the automation inside the building, and the cost is greater with automation inside the building than the building itself. The IT room is a multi-million-dollar IT room. These are very smart buildings. So it's all lumped in industrial wrapper. But the modern industrial building is a very high-tech automated building. And the old industrial building, yeah, that's a box. And, without forklifts, which was also a technological innovation, it couldn't do the throughput it could do today. But that serves business to business. Modern omnichannel buildings serve business to business, and they'll bring a package right to your doorstep. Another concept was that the Asia to U.S. route was dominated by the west coast of the U.S. California ports were by far the largest recipient of shipping containers. And then you had to put up with the cost of shipping it via rail or truck to the population centers, which were east of this. It's not the most efficient supply chain. And now, the Panama Canal, we saw that was 9 years in the making, and we took planning. It was decades in the making. And what it allowed was 3 times the capacity. Of 5,000 shipping containers shipped could now be a 15,000 shipping containers coming through the Panama Canal. And so we went from an east-west supply chain to north-south as well, because you can move goods from the Gulf of Mexico and Florida right up to the population centers. And now they're building ships that are going to ship goods up the Mississippi River, so container ships, barges and tugboats. But now they're designing ships. They won't be out capacity, right? But smaller ships, because they fit under these smaller bridges. Right? But the whole supply chain is being rethought, re-engineered. And as a result of COVID, this, just like the e-commerce trend was accelerated by the lockdown, the supply chain trend is accelerated by return to domestic manufacturing, self-sufficient supply chains. We went from just-in-time distribution, where we call lean supply chains that didn't really work out too well in the pandemic environment. We had a lot of shortages. Now people are preparing for maybe a second wave. I hope not, but just in case, from just in time to just in case philosophy, that the warehouses and the distribution centers are going to store more goods, and the supply chains can be more domestic based and closer to home. But this is showing the large shift coming through the Panama Canal in the post Panamax environments. It's expanded. Go to the next slide, and I'll show you how the market share has shifted. Before the Panama Canal was expanded, you had about a 60-40 split, with containers coming in through the West Coast, 60%, about 40% of the traffic came through the East Coast back in 2008. It's only been online since 2016. The expanded canal came online in June of 2016. And now it's about quickly a 50-50 split. And a lot of the industrial real estate owners, industrial REIT management teams, have a lot of assets on the West Coast, and they were saying it wasn't going to make a big difference in at least a decade. And here you're seeing how quickly it's getting equilibrium, hard shipping containers on the East Coast versus the West Coast. And prior to COVID, the West Coast was still seeing shipping container growth, but the East Coast was growing at a much more dramatic rate. The pandemic environment really accelerated that. So we'll see how that trend plays out. But another concept of where is the puck going? As far as the future's already here, it's not evenly distributed. It's here if you think about the expanded canal and where that's going to bring goods and what locations are going to benefit from it. Now, California, which is going to be hurt from it because you go to the next slide, Scott, you see, jump up another one, we'll come back next. Okay. So you'll see that this heat map shows the population centers are east of this, which used to come in through the West Coast, and even the rail arteries, because the lines that look like veins on the map are the major rail arteries. Of course, they're connecting the population centers, arteries east of this. So now California has so many challenges with lack of business friendliness, the wildfires, the issues going on out there. Now the supply chain is moving closer to population centers up through the Gulf of Mexico. Florida has more seaports than any state in the country, and you see Monmouth has more assets. The dots are showing our assets. And Florida's our #1 concentration, Texas #2. We try to be in business-friendly locations. Then there's the inland ports. Dallas-Fort Worth has the Alliance Airport, which is the largest all-cargo airport in North America. We have an asset at the airport there. And we have Memphis, which is FedEx's largest hub in the world. And we have Indianapolis, which is FedEx's second largest hub. And so we're in all these great logistics locations to serve the supply chain. Then if you go back one, Scott, which we skipped one essentially, this is interesting that you look at global trade and you measure it just by weight, by tonnage. And the cheapest way to move tonnage is a slow boat from China. So 90% of global trade comes by a ship. So only 10% is coming, via air. But if you measure it by value, high value goods, lead time is of essence for expensive goods, and they come in the belly of the jets. And so you're seeing FedEx and UPS, a lot of demand. 70% of the cargo used to move through commercial airlines, and now there's no commercial jets in the sky. I told you the air traffic's fallen to early 1970 levels. So people are chartering FedEx jets to move cargo. There's a huge backlog to move cargo via FedEx jets. So they cannot get enough jets. They cannot get enough pilots. The demand is sharp. And then if you jump ahead a couple slides, Scott. E-commerce growth is growing at a CAGR, as everybody should know, since the turn of the century, about 15% a year, 16%. If you jump one more, the COVID has really taken that, like I said, FedEx 3 years forward, where they estimated shipping time. So brick and mortar is the blue line at the bottom, the amount of retail going through traditional channels, I mean, you were just precluded from going to schools. They were forced to close. So even people who didn't know how to shop online were forced to open up accounts and figure it out. And there's a lot of stickiness to that because it's a much more efficient way to shop. You know, in the old days, you had to travel for hours to find things. Now anybody is in the heart of the Midtown Manhattan. They could find anything, anytime, anywhere, and FedEx will be happy to bring it to you. And people are ordering more than they desire because they don't know what color is going to be the best, they don't know what size is going to fit the best, and then they return it. Well, that FedEx doesn't mind that at all, nor does UPS. They get paid coming and going. But the returns is where a profitable value proposition becomes negative profit margins. So they really have to work out the returns, and therein lies need, the necessity to have a brick and mortar presence. Even a small mom and pop that just wants to purvey goods online to handle returns. FedEx has all those Kinko centers and Dollar General, and CVS, and they're partnering with lots of brick and mortar retailers, Walmart, et cetera. So you could just go there and return goods, and you see Amazon has lockers outside of Whole Foods. Returns is truly the Rubik's Cube in the equation. It's no small matter. So they could figure out a way to do that efficiently. It really eats into the profit margin. So we had always thought there would be a symbiotic relationship between brick and mortar and e-commerce. And there was until COVID. COVID was the straw that broke brick and mortar back. E-commerce was that big punch that now people could shop online. It was very productive, efficient, cost effective. And then you weren't even allowed to go to the stores. That was the second punch. We'll have to see which retail shopping centers will still be relevant as we emerge the other side of COVID. But with returns, there sure is a need. And then you have grocery goods and perishables. So there is a need to have a presence for certain aspects of the supply chain. And then if we just jump ahead, Scott, and jump in if I'm going too long on anything. But I do want to talk about getting back to how the wrapper of industrial encompasses old multi-tenant buildings with forklifts. And back up one more, yeah. So it's interesting, those buildings, but the new ones, look at the amount of land required in a new one. There's just so much parking. So when you compare that other building and you say, well, the rent is so much higher here and the price per pound is so much higher here, that's because it's sitting on a ratio of land to building 8-to-1 or greater. So somebody's got to pay for all that. So it's really not a good metric to use per square foot in these modern buildings, because it's per land square foot, it would make more sense. But per square foot of the building's a small percentage of the overall land mass, whereas the older buildings, it's the dominant percentage. So these new buildings, they have vans doing the last mile, they have the trailers taking you into the interstate and further distances, and they're running 3 shifts now. FedEx, as a result of growth of e-commerce pre-COVID, announced as of January they were doing 7-day shipping, 3 shifts. So 7 days a week, FedEx buildings are running. So as a FedEx landlord, that just makes our building that much more efficient, much more throughput is going through our building. And then if you look at how Amazon is such a dominant player, doing about 40% of e-commerce. During the next slide, Scott, big growth in e-commerce has been the other retail. This is our FedEx building in the middle. 12,000 square foot building, 11,000 square foot building. That's the I-4 Tampa to Orlando corridor, right near Disney World, right on the I-4 corridor. Look at those giant boxes flooding our building. Those are Walmart million square footers. And there's now a third one, not in the picture, but now there's a third million square foot Walmart. Walmart isn't like Amazon. They're not trying to become a logistics company. But they are realizing that they want to ship goods directly to the consumer's home. They have stores all over the country, and the largest employer in the world. They are embracing e-commerce in a very concentrated manner, as is Target, and Home Depot, and others. But they're not logistics companies. By Monmouth owning 9% of the FedEx ground network, we have industrial manual distribution. And so we target Home Depot, et cetera, and when they think about where they want to build their new fulfillment center, they want to build it as close to a FedEx distribution center as possible. This picture really well illustrates. We can get the goods in and out of our building quicker. The goods aren't even in our building for more than a couple of hours and out the door, up on the I-4 corridor, the way to the consumers. There still is a place for brick and mortar. There's certain type of services and elements of consumption, 70% of GDP, that cannot be done online. Boy, the amount of goods moving, bypassing the brick and mortar retail channel is amazing. And the future is truly already here, providing it's not even distributed, but those who can see it clearly. So I'll just stop there, Scott. Jump in later. I hope I didn't.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. And Mike, one quick question before we move over to Ashutosh. The one facility you had listed up there, the massive amount of parking, that was largely for the employees on the multiple shifts that are coming in, right?
Well, it's interesting. So employee parking, you have to have about 500 employee parking spots. And for 9 months of the year, you'll have 50 employees at the building. And peak season comes in October through January, and you'll have 500 to 550 employees. So COVID created a second peak. And COVID, now they experienced Christmas in July. Literally Christmas in July, everybody was shopping online, and so they had to ramp up. But in addition to the employee car park, you have van parking, you have trailer parking, so everything has increased. The amount of parking, not just for the automobiles, the vans and the tractor trailers, is also land is used for all of the the amount of shifts. So this Christmas season, I'm saying, is going to be the peak of all peaks. I say that every Christmas season. It's true every Christmas season. This is truly a gearing up of ship-a-thon. And so it's going to be very interesting to see charging surcharges, the already overbooking the network for the bandwidth, whether it's on a FedEx cargo jet, to a FedEx ground facility, already a critical juncture. It's going to be interesting to see if they can get everything into the Christmas tree in time. And we were saying earlier, though, it's great to be benefiting in an environment where it's such a challenging environment. The two real estate property types have appreciated in value post-COVID, and that's manufactured home communities and industrial real estate. But everything's linked in the economy, and if we don't have people getting paid, and we don't have jobs, and we don't return to positive GDP, it won't be the peak of all peaks. It'll be very difficult for consumers, regardless of how they peak.
Yep, fair point. Thank you. Ashutosh, one of the takeaways there, obviously a lot of takeaways, but that kind of struck me was the size of these buildings and the amount of excess land required. Obviously, as Mike said, part of that is for employee parking. But if I start thinking about, the labor intensiveness of what's going on inside, is there a way, it's kind of segueing over to you now, to automate that more, to bring in more robotics, to kind of maybe reduce the overall footprint and space that's being taken up, and obviously also be able to increase the productivity of the site as well.
Absolutely, and I'll hit some of those, but yeah, sure. I mean, the need for space is definitely just increasing. It's increasing for two reasons. One, there's a fundamental shift that has happened in the way products get to consumers or to yours and mine and our households, right? And it has happened because traditionally what was brick and mortar, where let's say a consumer company would pick a pallet or full pallet, deliver it to a retailer's warehouse as full pallets. From there, the retailer would pick some cases. Again, it's a distribution center. and take layers, that is section of a pallet at a time in most cases, and deliver to the stores. You and I would go to the stores, we would buy stuff from there, and supply chain was simple. Now, because of this omni and complexity that this has brought because of e-com, what used to be a pallet handling for most part of the supply chain has now stopped way early on, which means whatever these warehouses were doing, not only has the volume increased, the complexity of what happens within those buildings has shot up significantly. Because of that complexity, where now you're picking other those distribution centers or fulfillment centers are picking smaller boxes, smaller units, each is at a time, that requires just more space, more labor, and to prevent people, if I may simply say, from tripping over each other, you just need more space, right? So that has created a massive need for space. That is one part. The second part, to answer, Scott, your question, it's not just a space, and I'll come to a little bit of that, but in general, a big or a decent sized e-commerce operation, the ones that Mike mentioned, for example, right? That will take 2,000 to 3,000 FTEs, right? You don't get that much labor in most metro markets, right? And you can't sustain that because again, there are peaks and things like that. So that's one part. Second part, with the consumer expectations constantly evolving and always only getting stringent and moving towards acceleration of delivery, they want everything now, right? Partly it's the Amazon effect, but now everybody's starting or is playing in that space. So because of that, and the volumes increasing, now you need to process a ton of more orders workload in a small period of time. That means the throughput has to be significantly higher. Yes, you can add 5,000 people, but that's not productive. It's not helpful, it's not efficient, or even effective either. So hence, there is always this need for automation because of all these factors, right? Then on top of that, this is just outside of, let's say, ex-urban or suburban places. You talk about last mile delivery when you go into the metro markets closer to downtowns, right? Let's say New York City, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago. You need hubs that will do a significant volume, because if you put a DC outside, getting there for a 2 hour, 1 hour, 30-minute, right? Even a 4-hour delivery becomes very difficult. So now with real estate prices being so high, how do you now leverage smaller footprint to have that much productivity, to have a wide assortment of product, right? So that you can satisfy a wide variety of customers' tastes and preferences. That means you have to basically figure out denser ways to store and process your orders, which is why automation, even in smaller kind of footprint, sites, is becoming the norm. Right? Scott, does that help? Yeah, answer the question.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll quickly go over some of this. So if you flip just for a second, Scott. So yeah, I won't talk about myself here, but most of you may be familiar with McKinsey. Traditionally known as a strategy consulting firm. Over the past 8-9 years, 10 years almost, built operations as a big kind of area of focus, driven largely by clients' needs and where the industry was going. Today, ops is bigger than strategy, bigger than all other practices, right? So it's a huge part of McKinsey. We do strategy, ops strategy specifically, diagnostics, implementation, transformations across sectors. And we've been fortunate or blessed, I would say, to almost have clients that represent top 80% of any list that you can pick from the list of clients, whether it's Fortune 100, Fortune 500, right? Retail, CPG, pharma, real estate, private equity, whatever. So anyway, so today I'm going to talk about a few things really quickly. One is just give you a background of e-com acceleration, right? What we are seeing pre-COVID, post-COVID, how things have changed. What are retailers specifically and some other shippers doing to manage through this change? How are they kind of reacting to this? What are they doing to set themselves up? And similar to what I started earlier in response to Scott's question, what is the impact or implications of automation or technology or the developments that are coming in automation and technology space, or even digital, for example, on both the operations for, delivery, last mile pick, pack, ship, fulfillment, and also on real estate, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about everything again, given the time. Hopefully this gives you at least a flavor and, piques your interest enough to go and do more research on the topic. So Scott, if you kind of flip. Not news here, reading the title, we all know, e-commerce absolutely increased, post-COVID. It was already accelerating before COVID. As COVID hit, this just, kind of took off in proportions that nobody had imagined. Similar to what Mike was saying, what they expected to be in 2025 or 2027 or 2030 is now almost, pulled ahead, at least 5 to 7 years, right? So it's the scale or the magnitude is just crazy. But this is largely driven by consumer behavior that has changed in, a few critical ways. They are less willing to visit physical stores. We see, we run these surveys every month. This is from the last month. 45% expect to avoid malls even after lockdown ends, right? That's a worrisome sign for a number of mall operators and retailers and a bunch of other people that get supported because of that. In general, about close to 30% plan to avoid stores at all, right? They're like, yeah, I'm going to just sit and see what I can get without moving anywhere other than maybe work and school and home. They're more likely to spend online, a quarter of them or more. And they're more open to trying new brands, either because their experience with a given retailer, with a given offering, service, right, hasn't been great, or availability issues, or whatever be the reason, but they're now more open to trying something like that. Penetration of, just give you an example, penetration of grocery e-com was about 3%. During COVID, it hit a high of about 28 to 30%. Now it's back to about 15 to 17%. So 15 to 17% of all grocery sales right now is still done through e-com. But again, e-com doesn't mean always delivery to your home. It means partly home delivery, but it also means click and collect, which is the curbside and all that. Right? So if you flip, Scott, what this means is there is more route to market models that retailers are battling, which means what was traditionally just brick and mortar, right? And some nominal way of getting e-com just to show that we are in the game. Now it's meaningfully click and collect, that has become important. Local delivery through Instacarts or Ubers or Grubhubs, those kinds of offerings, and then direct fulfillment. The chart that you see on the left is showing a deterioration of margin or a dilution of margin. Brick and mortar gives you more margin than click and collect, then local delivery and direct fulfillment. And there's a reason, because click and collect, for example, there's people in the stores, labor, that essentially pick the products for you, right? That's a cost to the retailer, right? So versus you going inside and shopping for everything and the cashiers just staying there, now all those people inside, there's more people doing the work for you, and the retailers, while they have increased the prices a little bit, not enough to justify this, hence click and collect costs or the margins are lower. So as you see, these margins become dilutive as you go down this list from top to bottom. They are also doing a lot of different things though to cope up with this. So to Mike's point, to Scott's point, and what Bobby is going to talk about later, what are retailers doing? They're doing e-com. How are they accelerating this? They're investing into click and collect. Yes, because Their objective is to get you from bottom of that chart on the left to as high as they possibly can. Now, with the intent that we talked about on the previous page, where they don't really want to go, many people don't want to go into the stores, but not as many as were before. The retailers at least want you to stop at the click and collect level, which means now to make that efficient and to ensure margins stay as high as they can, they are now investing in dark stores, so converting old real estate stores that did not work because the volumes have gone down, to make them sort of mini distribution centers, right? Either for curbside pickup or for delivery from those locations. That's another innovative way, real estate is changing towards logistics and how automation is playing a role, because a number of these dark stores have started putting automation. Walmart, for example, they bought a company called Alphabot who does automation within the back of their own existing stores while operating for click and collect and for pickup orders, right? Or for delivery orders. They're also changing the merchandise and assortment mix, but we won't go there now. And they're also leveraging CPG players. So now, as you look at this, because retailers' footprints are limited from a distribution center, from a stores, right? And with the assortment that they carry, millions and millions of SKUs, but at any point in time, for example, Walmart has 400,000 SKUs plus. They can't possibly have all that, go the volume, and then keep delivering. So they're now asking the CPG companies to kind of set up these real estate, buy some real estate and set up these direct fulfillment, direct ship sort of models. So again, because there is no extra margins or premiums that the CPG companies get, they are again investing in automation and figuring out how they could leverage urban fulfillment centers to support their retailers' direct ship models. Right? Scott? I talked a little bit about this, but then coming out of COVID-19, what are some of the things that that retailers are doing? Some of the actions, right? They're reprioritizing capital investment, putting new DC capex on hold, but trying to accelerate omni-channel investment, right? So traditional retail supporting brick and mortar DCs, they're not looking at that. They're just focusing mainly on this. They're trying to create liquidity for reinvestment. So trying to figure out where they could sell and lease back assets that they own, right? They're looking at refinancing existing assets. So they're essentially doing the first three on the left, if you may call it, some sort of financial engineering to figure out how to bring more liquidity so that they can invest in the right areas, focusing on e-com and omnichannel. They're also looking at introducing lockers, curbside pickup, dark stores, as I talked about. And then lastly, investing in nimble automated systems, including robotics, right? That essentially not just focus on last mile, because yes, that's what we see, so that we get more excited about that. But to a retailer, it's everything from when they touch the product first, all the way. So they're getting the whole system, the value chain for them automated. That's what they're trying to focus on. The arrows are, I won't get into the details, but net, the point here is, irrespective of whether it's a grocery, big box, fashion, pharmacy, I mean, that this you could add 10 more columns. All arrows are either up, or flat, right? Nothing is down. So if you look at all of these things, the list on the left, everything is saying this is all top priority. Everybody's working on this, right? Scott? So what are they doing? They're balancing risk, capital, and internal capability to come up with a solution. So if I look at the fulfillment options, now I'm coming to the last mile again, right? If I look at the fulfillment options from left to the right, left is shipping from a store, right is shipping from a DC. If you could call it the traditional way, you have a DC somewhere outside a metro, right? And it's, or just in the suburbs of a metro, and it's used to fulfill that metro and a few more, maybe a couple more states around it. Automation and level of productivity, as you go from ship from store to a dark store to an urban fulfillment center, the productivity essentially increases as you go towards a full DC. The distribution center is set up to be a distribution center and operate like one. Productivity in general is high. Automation, again, well suited for automation because the ceilings are high and so on. Cost of rent per square foot, again, high towards the left. And as you go outside, it starts, decline. Similarly, inventory holding capacity, urban fulfillment centers, small, stores, very limited space. DCs have more space, right? Wages, again, it's a flip chart, right? So stores, the wages for a store associate are higher compared to the wages for a DC associate, right? And so they're trying to balance across all of this, right? Where should I be as a retailer or as a CPG company or even a pharma client of mine, pharma med device or a pharma medical distributor? They're looking at this. You'd imagine, at first you would think, what is a pharma or med device or med surge distributor trying to look at these options? They don't have stores. Yeah, but they're at least going to the dark store kind of concept where they're setting urban fulfillment centers or small fulfillment centers to support a group of hospitals, right? Or a group of medical offices and retailers in metro market. So everybody's literally kind of moving towards, figuring out of these four columns, what should they adapt? And in most cases, it's a hybrid. It's not like people or the companies are just anchoring towards, okay, I'm only going to ship from store, because that doesn't work. Or I'm only going to ship from DC. So from a real estate and automation perspective, their choices that they have to pick are also a mix or hybrid across the spectrum of choices that they have. Scott? So automation, it's a big opportunity. E-com, I talked about that, 15% CAGR, pre-COVID, post-COVID, much higher, closer to 24, 25. We don't have the numbers yet, but it's more 24, 25% as a conservative estimate as a CAGR. Cost for e-com logistics are high, 4 to 5x, right? At the same time, when you look at the total landed cost, when you think about a retailer, right, again, and you say, okay, there's a cost for a retailer to bring it from their distribution center to the store. There's a cost to bring it from the back of the store to the shelf. Then there's a cost to merchandise it, right? And if you look at a department store, every time you go and pick a t-shirt, you pick it from one spot, you go somewhere else, you like another t-shirt, the first one that you have in hand, you put it there. So there's a cost to bring all of those things back to nice looking, kind of a floor every night, multiple times a day. And when you add all these costs up, actually e-com is efficient, economically better, right? Which is why retailers are starting to figure out, okay, maybe stores may not be the place, which is why the dark stores and all of these are coming up. Continued shortage of workers. I think Mike hit those points. A significant shortage is coming up, right? And, you got to figure out a way to ensure the throughput will be there, right, going forward. And then tech, which is what Bobby will talk to you about a little bit, right? The automation evolution, it's rapidly evolving, right? Innovation is everywhere. And in general, automation used to be thought of as super expensive, can't do it, right? But now the economics are really, really becoming favorable, right? And I think that is why, you are getting higher throughput, lower unit cost, right? Lower upfront investment. And if it's nimble and agile, and why not? So that's what we are seeing, right? So I'll pause here and give it to Bobby.
Thanks, Ashutosh. Two things you said really kind of intrigued me. Obviously, you covered a lot of ground, but thinking about both the dark retail and kind of repurposing some of that urban or last mile retail inventory. But also, Mike, I want to come back to you and think about the increasing throughput that we might be able to get out of existing properties, and if that's going to ultimately impact real estate values differently from the historical perspective of land plus construction costs, right? But that dark retail aspect is really intriguing to me. In New York, as a New Yorker, I saw, we talked about this, one of the Whole Foods up in Midtown being converted to really a distribution center during the depths of the containment efforts. And that kind of leads us, I guess, to Bobby. A lot of what you guys are doing, while it might not be a dark retail space per se, you're really picking up the ball at that last mile and doing micro fulfillment, right?
That's right. Okay, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here with everybody today. And I think we're all in agreement that e-commerce is here and it's huge, and it's been accelerated dramatically by the time machine that we call COVID. And what Fabric is all about, we're totally focused on enabling retailers to provide on-demand e-commerce and to do it profitably. And neither of those things are easy, especially for the traditional brick and mortars. And we have a really sort of breakthrough, not only set of business processes, but technology that we call micro-fulfillment that I'm going to share with you. And so, Scott, let's start off with a quick video to give these guys an idea of what micro-fulfillment looks like. And hopefully the video will work. Nothing, huh?
Were you guys able to see that at all?
No. I couldn't see it at all, Scott.
It probably needs to be PowerPoint. I think it's just a PDF of it.
No, it will run. It will run straight from the PDF. I use it every day.
Well, the irony is it's playing on my computer, but I'm not able to share that one. I'm rocking out watching it. It's a good video. Sorry about that hiccup. We guess we won't be able to watch it,
No worries.
unfortunately.
No worries. Okay, a little bit about Fabric. So Fabric is a tech startup. We were founded 5 years ago in Tel Aviv. We moved our headquarters to the United States about 18 months ago. Headquarters is in New York City. As I said, we're completely focused on this concept of micro-fulfillment, which is about enabling retailers to actually do on-demand e-commerce. And by the way, we defined on-demand commerce as I click on the e-commerce app, place an order, and I can either pick it up on the curb or have it delivered to my home within 1 or 2 hours. Huge challenge for, as you might expect, for traditional brick and mortar retailers. We've, as you can see on our slide, we're high growth, venture capital backed tech company. We've raised almost 140 million. And as I said, we've moved our headquarters to the US and we're growing very rapidly in the US. We've got over 20 micro fulfillment sites live, and we're in contract negotiations with 5 of the top 10 grocers in the US today. So hopefully you'll be seeing a lot of us very soon. So, Amazon has conditioned us all to the idea of we should be able to order anything we want from the comfort of our home, and we should be able to get it like now, right? Within, originally it was like 3 days and 2 days, and now it's 1 day and even 1 hour. So the challenge, the issue for traditional brick and mortar retailers is it just really comes down to this. How do they do it fast enough? Because they're not built to do it that way. Their supply chain's not built to do it that way. And how do they do it profitably? And oh, by the way, the stakes are really high. You see how high, how rapidly e-commerce has grown. So they have to do it. They've got to do it immediately, and they've got to figure out a way to make money at it. Okay, so next slide, Scott. And so in the e-commerce world, we talk about there's really 2 types of e-commerce. There's grocery, and then there's everything else. Grocers have been impacted by more than any other retail vertical by far. They've got the most to gain, and they've got the most to lose. So I won't read these statistics to you, but I think you guys get it right. It is literally critical to their actual survival to be able to do e-commerce and be able to do it profitably. In fact, research shows that typical grocer loses between $5 and $15 on every e-commerce order that they do today. So they have a huge problem, and we believe we have the tech to solve that. So next slide, please. Okay, so looking at my, for those of you that are familiar with the Gartner Group and the Gartner Magic Quadrant, this is sort of our take on a Magic Quadrant for on-demand e-commerce. If you think about how retailers can solve that problem, they're really, there are two factors to consider. One is how are we going to do it? And the second question is, where are we going to do it, right? So are we going to do it locally, or are we going to do it regionally? And are we going to do it manually, or are we going to automate it? If you, let's stick with grocery for the example, because everybody understands that and has probably clicked and done an online order. If you think about what the grocers have done so far, they really had no choice, right? They had to do e-commerce, and they had to do it quickly. And so their approach was to do it locally and do it manually. And there are two ways of doing that. They can either have their own people, going through the store, picking the items off the shelves, or they hire a third party, such as an Instacart, right? Both of those are problematic for grocers in terms of the labor costs and the cost being driven up to the end customers, not to mention what it does to the in-store customer experience. If you have either your own employees or third parties, rushing through the store, picking online e-commerce orders. The second option is, well, I could do it centrally and I could do it manually, because, hey, the beauty of central is I've already got warehouses and DCs and things like that. I can leverage it. The trouble with that is that's kind of a lose-lose, right? You're doing it manually, so the labor costs are going to kill you just like they do if you do a manual pick in the store. And then worse, since you're centrally located, it drives up the last mile cost. And by the way, it pretty much even kills the idea of doing on-demand e-commerce, because it's pretty much impossible, from a regional distribution center to get it to the customer's home, within an hour. And then, the other option is, well, the third option is you could do it automated, but you could do it centrally. And there are some nice solutions out there that do that. The trouble with those, though, is you're just killed on the last mile, right? You can't do it in an hour, and you can't do it profitably within an hour, even though you've automated everything centrally. So the upper right quadrant, as in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, is where you want to be. The combination is you've got to do it in an automated fashion, and you've got to do it locally. That's the only way that you can do it and do it profitably, and literally do on-demand e-commerce in an hour or two. So that leads us to this breakthrough concept of micro-fulfillment. So Scott, let's go to the next slide for micro-fulfillment. Okay, so what exactly is micro-fulfillment? It's this concept of having small-scale automated fulfillment centers that are located close to the customer. So you get the automation, and so therefore you can take your labor costs down and actually make it profitable. And you're close to the customer, and so therefore you can actually do it in an hour, and you can keep the last mile delivery costs down. And so, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So there are actually two approaches to doing, micro fulfillment. And again, as I mentioned earlier, there's grocery, and then there's everything else. I can tell you that in the grocery world, they love this idea of micro fulfillment, and the model that they like is they like to have it on their own property. If you think about the Fabric micro fulfillment center, which is the most flexible and can go down to the smallest size possible, we can do a micro fulfillment center as little as 4,000 square feet and a 12-foot clear ceiling height. So what grocers love is this idea of being able to carve out a few thousand square feet in the back of their store, and therefore they can they can get the cost down, and they can get the orders delivered within an hour. What is unique about Fabric in terms of our approach to micro fulfillment is, but as you would expect, we have competitors. We are really the only company that built our solution as a purpose-built solution specifically to solve this problem of micro fulfillment. Whereas most of our competitors took existing technology that's been around for a long time, conveyors and lifts and things like that, and tried to rework that to solve a modern day urban technology challenge. And so we believe that we uniquely solve this problem that nobody else really does. And some of the interesting things that we've done to make this work. And so you have to think about it this way. We want to keep the costs down, and we need to have it small enough such that it will fit in the back of a store, right? So it has to be incredibly flexible. One way to make it incredibly flexible is to use components that have multi-purpose. So if you see in the diagram, for instance, down in the lower right, those are essentially what we call the touch points, and so that's where the human actually interacts with the automation, and those touch points are actually used not only to do what's called decanting, which is putting the items out into the inventory that go out into the Fabric cube, and it's also where the picking is done. It saves you space, and it also allows you to get what we call instantaneous capacity. So for instance, let's say you had 4 of those touch points, and during normal operating hours, 2 of those are being used for decanting, and 2 are being used for picking. During the peak hours, you could take those 2 that were doing decanting and allow them to do picking. So you've effectively doubled your capacity to pick orders during peak times. The second thing is, it's really critical with this, since it's all about time and money, to have a solution that is resilient and doesn't break down. If you think about the older solutions that use conveyors and things like that, they're riddled with, single points of failure, right? And so if a conveyor goes down, your system's down. With the Fabric model, the worst thing that can happen is one of our hundreds of robots could go down. And in that case, all the other robots just navigate around it. It literally doesn't even have, you even have to take the robot out until, maybe the shifts change. And which also, and 2 other really interesting things about our product, we designed it from, as I said, from the ground up for micro fulfillment. And the part of that is it not only need to be able to put it in small places, you need to be able to put it in oddly shaped places, right? Because when you're in urban and suburban environments, it's not like you can get the clean high ceiling heights like you can get out in the distribution center, right? So our solution is made to really fit in crazy places. For instance, our first grocery site that we built in Tel Aviv is actually in the basement of a parking garage of a skyscraper in downtown Tel Aviv. And so the building's like 80 years old and has odd ceilings and big columns in the way and all sorts of things. And so our solution is flexible enough to be able to be built around it. And then the last thing I would say is, and by the way, I did mention this when I was giving you sort of a high level overview of the company. We changed the name of our company a little over a year ago. We used to be called Common Sense Robotics, and we changed the name of the company to Fabric. And the reason we changed the company name was not because we love the name Fabric. It's because we wanted consumers to understand that we are a software company. We happen to need robots, but the magic is in the software. And the approach that we took is using simple, reliable robots with cloud-based, very sophisticated software to drive the robots. Okay, next slide, Scott. I'll just spend a second on this. As I said, we are a software company, and it's an 80-20 split. If you think about our development resources, 80% are software engineers versus 20% hardware engineers. We have a full stack solution. Yes, it's the robots. It's also the warehouse control system and a full-blown e-commerce warehouse management system. We own all the IP for all of the software and the hardware, and have quite a few patents.
Sorry, I don't want to necessarily cut you off, but we are hitting a ceiling here. I think I may have been a little aggressive thinking we could dig into all this content in 1 hour. I want to make sure that we have some time to answer some questions from the audience. One member asked on building heights, new developments, are we going to be seeing changing building heights? Bobby, it sounds like you can accommodate pretty much any type of real estate and all sorts of sizes, which obviously probably makes a lot of sense for urban markets.
Yeah, we really don't have to have anything fancy. We just need a roof that doesn't leak, a floor that's level, at least about 4,000 or 5,000 square feet, and at least about 12-foot clear ceiling height. And even then, it doesn't have to be the entire ceiling. You can have situations where it dips down, and we can build around that.
Got it. Look, maybe we'll leave on this thought and discussion of value. Mike, I want to posit to you that historically, real estate has intrinsic value stemming from the land costs and the construction costs. Makes a lot of sense, right? And then, market value fluctuates around that. But as you think about some of the technology that Ashutosh was thinking about, if you think about maybe the increased throughput that Bobby's able to achieve, are we going to see a shift in real estate valuations and industrial valuations where you start to see this difference based on throughput, rents and values based on throughput rather than construction costs? Or maybe part and parcel in that, are we going to see construction processes change? Are we going to see a lot of this hardware being actually integrated in the construction process and being owned by the landlord rather than the tenant?
Well, it's an interesting question, Scott. Increased throughput will result in increased demand, which will transfer into higher rents. So whether you're monitoring the throughput and valuing as based on throughput, or just the supply and demand of real estate that's historically been the barometer of values. The supply and demand, there's just going to be so much demand because of the need for greater throughput and the bypassing of brick and mortar and the lack of lean supply chains to just encase supply chains, the re-onshoring of manufacturing. So as long as the population is growing, there's going to be demand for throughput. And throughput goes back to, this whole conversation is how can we be more efficient in getting goods from point A to point B, whether it's last mile, first mile, everything in between. And you go way back to the old days, people used to load a ship up, just piling things up. And then a dock hand named Malcolm McLean came up with the brilliant idea, let's have uniform shipping containers so we could stack them. We put them in the box and stack the boxes. And that one invention made him, billions because it created such efficiency in throughput and how you could get goods more efficiently moved. So that became, like you're saying, monitoring throughput. So that became the way to monitor. Everything was in a 20-foot equivalent unit shipping container, moved goods faster. The costs went down, but the profitability went through the roof, because it was just more efficient. So I do think it's just going to be supply and demand and value in things, and rents will go. And then as far as, getting more real estate out of smaller space, going up, more cube space and all that. If the land value is so expensive, you have to go higher, you have to stack things, you have to make more use of that exorbitant land cost. So then, inland real estate near New York, outside of New York, and other major cities throughout the world, and Tokyo, they're doing multi-story, high cube space, greater clear, trucks are driving up and up and up, 4-story, 6-story, 8-story, et cetera. So it's the land cost that's driving. In order to realize a return on that investment, you have to go up in space. You can't go horizontal. You got to go vertical. And conversely, you saw our FedEx building with Walmart has these giant boxes, but the goods are in our building only for a few hours. They're in and out. And so there you don't need the big cube space. You just need the fast automation. And so, again, looking back at past this prologue, the forklift was a great technological innovation. And now it's getting more intelligent, artificial intelligence. We're using smart, autonomous forklifts with robots driving. So a lot of this conversation is, how can we replace human labor with AI? And that is the future. And for AI, you don't have to worry about it succumbing to a virus, legacy of computer viruses. But for the most part, you don't have to socially distance from robots. So it's, again, the throughput is where this is all going. But how you measure it and how that affects valuation, I think it will always just come down to supply and demand.
Yep. Awesome. Like Bobby, speaking of the containers and how that revolutionized logistics, it looks like you guys are doing that. Maybe at some point we can get some students out to your location in Brooklyn.
We'd love that.
Good. Look, I apologize. We ran out of time. We're gone well over, and we're starting to lose students for their evening class. I want to thank you guys for your time, the preparation you put into this. I think we've only begun to scratch the surface in technology and how it's going to impact both the logistics efficiencies, but also property values. So, I'll invite you guys back, and we'll do this a little more one-on-one and get a little more deeper in this. So over the coming months.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate
That's great. Thank you, guys.
Yes, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. All right. Cheers. Be well.